we should take a step back and dig into some of the actual mechanics of gummy manufacturing. We had a couple comments where people were like, "Hey, you guys are supply chain people. You're talking a lot about branding and finance stuff like that." Well, this is the supply chain episode you've been waiting for, and I think that when you take a look at supplements or the beauty industry in general, there's some key components that go into making a gummy. The first and most obvious is you have to have a base. This is what gives it its shape. It's what holds the structure. It holds all the active ingredients. And traditionally, these have been made with gelatin. Gelatin is the exact same stuff that goes into Jello. And you would add any sweeteners, waters, or other binders in there that help determine how chewy or soft the gummy was actually going to be. And the base is actually extremely important because even though it doesn't have a whole lot of nutritional value to it, the complexity of the base determines how much room you have left in the gummy to put other things in there. And those other things are really the active ingredients. So this could be anything from vitamins or minerals, botanicals, mushrooms, CBD, etc. And the challenge is that most actives don't play nicely with heat, pH, each other, or just plain taste bad. And so these are some of the big limiting factors that gummies have had, for the first 70 years. Once you have your bases and your actives, you mix them together. You actually heat the mixture until you reach what's called the right solids content. And it's basically how much of the good stuff is in the gummy. And you want to make sure it's equally dispersed throughout the mixture, so you don't have all of one thing and a couple, and just the base and a couple of the other gummies. If the mixture is too hot or too wet, the actives will actually break down, meaning that it won't be helpful at all. It's basically just candy at that point. And if it's too cold, it won't set. It'll be very runny. Once you have things mixed, you deposit the warm slurry into thousands of small molds. So again, think about the little bears that you're used to seeing. And you really want to make sure that each gummy has the same dose of the actives. Once they get cooled, they firm up, and then typically you coat them with something so they don't stick together when they're in the bag.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, it really sounds very similar to how Jello or candy would be made. I mean, is that far off in terms of the process?
It's pretty close. I mean, that's really how it's been for the longest time. And the first era of these supplement gummies in the 1990s were really just that. It was candies and vitamins. And this was because gelatin was the universal base. And there are some properties about gelatin that just make it difficult for supplements. The first is that it has a very low heat tolerance and low pH stability, which means that only very basic vitamins can be added in small doses. So think vitamin A, vitamin C, D, E. If you try to add nutrient dense ingredients like cream powders or probiotics or adaptogens, minerals, they either get destroyed in the gel, they tasted terrible, or they precipitate out. And so these gummy vitamins early on were essentially just fortified candy with trace nutrients. And so you think about like the pediatrician saying, "Hey, I don't know if this is actually helpful or not." It's true because we were just feeding kids candy. But in the 2000s, the base format, which was still primarily gelatin, started to change, and people began to experiment with pectin. And pectin has allowed for better flavor systems to come on board. You have more stable sweeteners and binders and early microencapsulation or active ingredients. And this allows you to start playing with some of the larger vitamin doses. And so you can fit more of the active stuff into the gummy. And there are simple ingredients like melatonin or biotin or vitamin C that are now available in a gummy format. And this is really the insight that let Ollie launch in 2014. They had great branding, but they didn't really have the great gummy chemistry that we see later to support where they wanted to be. And so their insight was, let's just treat supplements like a beauty product and use it all the time. And then you get to the 2010s, and there were three main breakthroughs that advanced the chemistry of gummies. The first was that pectin went from being an experiment to really the standard in terms of bases. And again, this allowed you to have higher heat tolerances and broader pH ranges. You could position as vegan or vegetarian, and it just was held more moisture overall. And with pectin, you can start to put earthy or grassy ingredients into gummies, and you did this without them dissolving the gel or turning into a sludge. The second big breakthrough was the process of microencapsulation. And this allows manufacturers to basically take the molecule and put something else around it so that you can hide the taste of really bitter ingredients, or you can control for time release so that things hit your stomach and then are released over time versus flooding all at once. And this allowed manufacturers to add in minerals and botanical extracts and probiotics and things like that. And with this, you start getting more and more sophistication in terms of depositing equipment. People are able to add these active ingredients in mass. You're able to take the solid concentrate, which again is the good stuff that goes in the gummy, from 65% all the way up to 82%. So now it's just a better vehicle to do these nutrients. And then lastly, in like the late 2010s, early 2020s, these functional gummies really became a validated format with a couple other breakthroughs. The first was that manufacturers were able to create really low sugar matrices and sugar substitutes. And this allowed them to take an enormous amount of sugar out of what was candy before. And taking it out was helpful from a health perspective, but it also made room for them to put in more active ingredients. And so now you can look at 50 to 60 nutritional actives that are in a gummy compared to just a dozen a few years ago. Again, more steps forward in flavor masking, and then the co-manufacturing ecosystem really matured in about the 2018 timeframe, where up until 2018, if you wanted to produce a gummy, you were talking to a company that produced candy as well as supplements. And starting in 2018, you start to see companies that are only focused on gummy supplements come out, and these are like a new class of world-class manufacturers that allow you to do things like layered gummies, low temperature depositing, process stability, all sorts of really sophisticated things that are more common with pharmaceuticals than candy production.